A reflection for March 7th, 2021, entitled, "Is This the Hill I Want to Die On?" Jesus Cleanses the Temple. John's Gospel for this third Sunday of Lent reads in part, "Since the Passover was near, Jesus went up to Jerusalem. He found in the temple area those who sold oxen, sheep, and doves, as well as the money changers seated there. He made a whip out of cords and drove them all out of the temple area with the sheep and oxen, and spilled the coins of the money changers and overturned their tables. And to those who sold doves he said, 'Take these out of here and stop making my Father's house a marketplace.' His disciples recalled the words of Scripture, 'Zeal for your house will consume me.' First, in order to better appreciate what is being communicated to us in this moment in the life of Jesus, some context. In April of 2011, author and longtime activist John Deere offered this, and since I couldn't possibly say it better, I will offer it as it is to you. The Jerusalem temple was held up as the one and only place where God dwelt. We have nothing quite like it today. It combined worship, commerce, local government, execution site, and imperial control. As I understand it, it would resemble some massive Washington, D.C. building containing the Pentagon, the U.S. Capitol, the White House, Wall Street, the World Bank, Citibank, Goldman Sachs, Walmart, the National Cathedral, and the Shrine of the Immaculate Conception all rolled into one as God's home. The faithful were told to pay God a visit each year. Every Passover, they made the long trek to Jerusalem and paid a hefty fee to enter God's sanctuary. The population tripled to over 180,000. Over 18,000 lambs would be purchased and slaughtered for holy sacrifice in the temple. And a heavy tax was charged for all of this commerce. In effect, the temple held a national bank, offered loans, kept track of debts, and changed money for unclean sinners so they could pay with, quote, holy temple money. Another fee would be added for the money changing. Women, poor people, and other outcasts had to purchase expensive doves so they would be purified and then able to offer worship. The various fees robbed the poor and lined the pockets of religious authorities and Roman occupiers. Anyone who cared about justice or read the prophets would be outraged at such institutional injustice. It is only natural that Jesus took action to protest this big corporate imperial religious ripoff. As various commentators have noted, Jesus did not merely want lower prices for the poor. He did not seek to reform the temple. Through this symbolic action, he called for an end to the entire temple system. With this action, he announced that God was present within every person, present whenever 2 or 3 gathered to pray in his name, present in the hungry, sick, imprisoned, present in the breaking of the bread and the passing of the cup, present in spirit and in truth. Of course, this action and those teachings threatened and outraged the religious authorities. Their economic and political privilege would end if Christ's teachings were adopted, so they had him killed. In this piece, John Deere goes on to discuss why he sees this act of Jesus's not as an act of violence, but rather an act of nonviolent civil disobedience. But there is something else here. In the story, the disciples recalled that it was said in the Scriptures, "Zeal for your house will consume me." If John Deere is right, and Jesus did call for an end to the entire temple system, an end to a system that favored the privileged few at the expense of the many, and especially those most vulnerable, and to replace that system, that kind of temple, with one that welcomed outcasts, welcomed the sick and the poor, welcomed women and the downtrodden. It's not hard to imagine how he ended up arrested and killed. We've heard the metaphorical question, is this really the hill you want to die on? The question asks, is this really worth it? Sometimes when that question is asked, you could even get the sense that no hill is worth that I would lay down my life for it. But there must be some hill worth dying on. Jesus surely thought so. I mean, there it is. You will not, you money changers, set yourself up in God's house and enrich yourselves through the exploitation of those who have so little to start with. Jesus was aware of the consequences. He knew he would die on that hill. And so what do we make of this? We who are his disciples, that we too are called to stand on a hill and allow radical zeal for God's house to consume us? But again, there's more. That hill on which Christ stood, in a state of such complete abandonment to the will of God, where he would be arrested and beaten and mocked and crucified and die, is the same hill from which immeasurable life was allowed to and did explode into being in the resurrection. Also in John, Jesus tells us that unless a grain of wheat falls to the ground and dies, it remains a single grain. But if it dies, it bears much fruit. And it is in the cleansing of the temple that he shows us what that really means. So what hill are you willing to die on? Is there some monumental, dramatic moment when, upon finding that hill, we offer ourselves to God, plunge to our deaths, and rise again in the glory of the resurrection? Maybe. But maybe we spend our lives searching for hills, and then summoning the courage to die on them, and succeed, and fail. And we die one time in one moment, and another time we die of 1,000 cuts. But this is our path, and these are our hills. Because these are not just the hills we die on, these are the hills we live on, and upon which we, like Jesus, are resurrected.